Okay,
Can we have more people on this?
now it's, no, just me.
Are you the others?
Oh, wait, there we go, okay. Attendees.
Sites to define.
Okay, welcome to our solid waste management master plan public information session. We are streaming this one as well as having folks in the room. We're streaming on Zoom. And this will be recorded as well for and will be posted on our website. We have a presentation that our consultant Jean-Louis Godet is going to provide for us. And then once the presentation is done, we will have a question and answer period. So, sorry, we also have John Smith joining us from EXP as well, our consultant, and he's joining virtually. So, JL, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone for coming out here tonight. So today we're here to talk about the Township Solid Waste Management Master Plan. So thanks for having us here tonight. We'll skip to the next slide and just talk a bit about why we're here.
Yes, there we go.
Okay. So the purpose of this project is to existing waste management services to look at what is being offered, how are those programs doing, and then also to explore new ways and innovative ways to meet the township's waste management needs both now but also in the future. So in doing that, you're looking at ways to promote sustainable waste management practices, so things that will help make the system more efficient, and also how to encourage the multiple the waste hierarchy. We want to look at how to reduce waste generation, so we're not just looking at diverting waste from landfill, but also just reducing waste generation as a whole, but also increasing waste diversion. That's a very critical component in that as well through this project. So let's move on to our next slide. Okay, so one of the first things that we do as part of this waste management plan is to look at what services are being offered by the township and what is the waste that's being generated in the township and how is that being managed. So right now the township manages about 4,300 tons. This is based on 2023 data. And of that waste, about 2/3 of it is being disposed, and about 1/3 is being diverted. So about most of that waste is residential garbage. or about 2,300 tons is the garbage. Other garbage or other waste that's being disposed would be what we call IC&I waste, or the industrial, commercial, and institutional waste, and business waste. That's about 264 tons. And in the balance, we have waste that is being dropped off at the waste disposal sites, waste that's coming from the various town facilities, and other large items. So for the waste that's being disposed in the township, the bulk of that is through the Blue Box program. So roughly about 1,000 tons. We also have the leaf and yard waste and brush that's being diverted, and other diversion programs as well. So that makes about roughly 1,400 tons over the course of a year. And if we go to the next slide, one thing that's important to note is that there is other diversion that is taking place in the township, and a lot of that is through the various stewardship programs. So battery recycling, material, the hazardous waste that's being taken to the Kingston site. So those are important aspects as well, but those amounts aren't covered in the 4,300 tons, but it's still important diversion as well.
Next slide.
So when we want to look at how we're going to divert waste, one of the things that we like to look at is what is our makeup in the garbage. So in the fall, we completed a waste composition audit, and we took a look at materials going into the household garbage. So one of the big findings is that more than half of the garbage is organics, so about 52%. So this includes things like food waste, your paper towels, tissues, things like that. Other divertible waste that could be diverted from landfill or diverted out of your garbage were things that could go into your Blue Box program, so things like plastics and paper packaging. Another big item were textiles, so about 5% of the garbage was found in textiles. And there are a few other items as well, things like some metals, Blue Box glass, things like that. But it's interesting to note that, based on the audit, most of the metals and glass that could normally go in your Blue Box is being diverted to your Blue Box programs. So about 21% of the garbage is made up of things that are either really difficult to recycle, or there aren't really programs for it, things that we might consider that to be waste. But for the most part, there are things in there that can be diverted. So with the understanding of what is in the garbage, we then look at, okay, what are the main opportunities for diversion? So if we go to the next slide, you can see that really organics is probably your biggest bang for the buck, as we like to say. So that has the biggest opportunity for waste diversion. So based on the 2023 data and the audit, we estimate that there's roughly about 1,200 tons per year of organics going into the garbage and ultimately to the landfill. That could be diverted. If you were able to divert all of that, that could add another 28% to your conversion rate. You wouldn't normally divert that much, but you would be able to divert up to 60–65%, and it's still a big sizable chunk of diversion that can be there. The other two items that we have here that could go into the Blue Box, so plastics and paper packaging, that could add another roughly 10% to your diversion, and textiles as well, about another 3%. And textiles, there's ways that some could be reused, and other aspects that could potentially be recycled if there are programs available. That can be a little bit trickier. It's not as well established as, say, Blue Box for organics, but it is also something that could be considered. So now that we have a sense of what is in the garbage, we took a look at a broad list of options, and what we call our long list. And we did a screening process, and we came up with what's called a short list of options. And so I'm going to run through these tonight. So on the slides and on the information that's on the Engage Loyalist webpage, we have the options listed. We'll have some costing in there. It's very high level cost. I'm not going to go too much into the costing tonight. It's really more just as a guide, the amount of cost that these options would be. Really depends on how they're implemented, whether they're implemented together. Because they wouldn't necessarily, for example, if you have costs together, you wouldn't necessarily just add this cost on top, because there may be some synergies in place. So but those are just sort of ballpark costs to give a sense of what might be involved. So starting at waste reduction and reuse, one of the options that we included in our short list is to promote the on-site management of organics. So this would be things like backyard composting, grass cycling, and also there's opportunities for what we sometimes we'll call in-home composting appliances. So this would be things like your food cycler, like that the municipality is piloting. Another option for waste reduction and reuse is for the township to support waste minimization and diversion at special events. So if there are events that are taking place, perhaps there could be educational resources or other things that could be there to help encourage waste reduction and minimization. Another option would be to have more support or continued support of community reduce and reuse programs. There are a lot of municipalities will have a lot of thrift stores or reuse centers, so there can be continued support of things like that. An example that we have here is a poster from the City of Toronto where they're just encouraging people to make old new. There could be things like that. Now, recycling is always going to be a key part of programs in municipalities. One of the options would be to add new categories to the recycling programs. Now, with Blue Box Recycling being transitioning to the stewardship organizations, there are other things that perhaps the municipality can look at in the end, other new types of materials. For example, carpet recycling, more textile recycling. So there's just, as technologies change and evolve, there are new opportunities that come up for recycling. So that's something to be on the lookout for. Another option for increasing recycling is to develop a strategy for public space recycling. So ways to encourage more recycling and better recycling in public areas. So the strategy for that could be helpful. We talked about organics being one of the main opportunities. One of the ways of doing collecting that material would be organics collection and composting program. I'm sure you've seen them. They're very common across Ontario. So Green Bin program would certainly allow the municipality to collect a lot of that material, and whether it could be assessed, do they process it in-house or send to a third-party facility. The food cycler appliance, that's something that a lot of people are interested in. So that could be something that could be expanded in a broader pilot. There has been some pilot testing of that, and some of the results have been interesting. One other option could be to have a broader pilot to see how it works on a broader scale. Another option to add a service for collecting organics would be to expand the leaf and yard-based collection and composting program. And that could involve extending the frequency or catchment area of the leaf and yard-based program, and then as well at processing the material at their house or perhaps sending it to another facility for processing. Another option for reducing food waste would be a food waste reduction strategy. For this type of option, it's really looking at the efficient use of food. So helping to teach people to only buy what they need in terms of food waste, and when they have that food, to not let it go to waste. So there's a program called Love for Waste, which started off in the UK. It's been coming to Canada. There's a number of municipalities that are participating in that, and they have information about how to avoid food waste. There's also some more local, there's a Sustain Ontario program, and then there's the Food Mesh program where they look at working with like commercial places to pass along food waste that perhaps isn't good enough to sell, but can still be used. So we also took a look at ways of modifying how waste is collected and how that waste is received. So there's a number of options that can be looked at for that. One is green collection. This is very common in places where they have green cart composting. So basically that's where the garbage is collected every second week. Another option we're looking at is more of a expanding service. Would be to have curbside garbage collection on Empress Island. Another option could be to look at a zero emissions solid waste fleet. This wouldn't necessarily increase diversion per se, but what it would do is reduce the greenhouse impact of waste collection. The next two can go hand in hand. One is looking at cart-based garbage collection, which is using carts to collect garbage. And one of the reasons for that would be to make things more efficient on the road, but also for worker health and safety. And also allow for including the call RFID technology. So that's when we have the chip, the radio frequency identification, and that can be used to help with data collection. And another option for waste collection that are being considered would be to pilot test alternative collection containers in public spaces. So really looking at when there's collection of garbage and recycling in public spaces, what are some other type of containers that can be used that either might be more efficient or might be more interest to people for having artwork on the containers. So one of the key things in making sure these programs work is to have an effective promotion and education. Because if you don't have good promotion and education, typically these programs won't work. So want to make sure that looking at promotion education options are considered. So one is to have focused promotion, focused promotion and education campaigns. So that's really looking at, you have a certain problem area, if there's a material or there's a certain contamination issue, that might be an issue. You might have some focused campaigns on that. Maybe there are certain times of the year like Christmas that have a lot of waste. Maybe you have campaigns along reducing waste at Christmas time. So that's an option. Another is looking at having enhanced social media presence and the use of apps. The city, the township has its engaged loyalist page. They also have a recycle coach app. So it's also looking at what are some ways that can be leveraged to increase. Also looking at developing a waste management program branding. So that way there's increasing the recognition of the solid waste management program so that when you see that brand, you know that the message is going to be about waste and recycling. And it's just a way of creating the visibility of the waste management program. So we have some examples here from some other municipalities. A couple here for Toronto. One is they have a series of videos, and this particular video is pretty grab. I'm not going to watch it, but why can't you take it to green bin? So explaining why certain materials can't go into the green bin, and a sign about reminding people that dog food is not going to recycling. Won't comment on that, I guess. And Durham region where they have their mascots. So on that topic of promotion education, another thing that can get looked at is working with the IC&I community and commercial businesses to help them develop and have some education and have some promotional materials for increasing diversion in the workplace. So some examples here. It's a brochure that the City of Toronto put out about how businesses can reduce single-use items, and also in Nova Scotia where they had some items, some information on how businesses can sort waste and then encourage their customers to put waste in disposal, as they say there. Okay, so something that municipalities will use to influence and to influence how waste is managed and handled. And so these are some policies that we're considering as part of the short list. So one would be to introduce garbage bag limits. So right now there's a bag tag system. So perhaps one option could be to reduce the number of bags that can be set out at the curb. Another one, and this is one that is for the longer view, would be to eventually increase the cost of the bag tag. It's not something we're looking at right now, but as we're looking at a plan that goes for 30 years, it's something that we have to consider at some point. Having differential or graduated landfill tip fees. So that's basically where you charge more for waste that could be segregated or separated. So if somebody brings in an exploded waste, that might have a higher tip fee than waste that might be separated out into materials. Having added enforcement of the waste collection bylaw to make sure that people are separating things the way they should be. Switching to clear garbage bags is another policy option. This is becoming more common in Ontario as a way of making sure that people are putting things where they should be. There's also a safety component so that workers people who are picking up the waste aren't accidentally grabbing things like needles or broken glass. So it's a safety issue there too. And having more waste diversion at the township facilities. So there's an event taking place, there's mandatory waste diversion there. Other policies that could be considered. So having multi-residential waste standards. So basically, if you have a development for multi-residential or an apartment building, that there's standards in place so that waste management is considered, or there's going to be some upgrades to the facility, to the apartment building that it includes options that will allow for waste diversion, including things like bans and production strategies for single-use items, green procurement, so that if there's a preference for green products or products that use less waste with municipalities' procurement activities, having updated waste management performance metrics. So essentially what this is, there's different ways of measuring how a program is successful. Traditionally it's been on the tonnage diverted, as the type of waste has evolved. Some materials are lightweighted, so sometimes tonnage is not the best way to measure diversion or measure success, so there could be other ways of measuring success. The last one was having periodic multi-season waste audits. And really, this is a way of allowing the municipality to measure the success and performance of its program. Okay, now let's switch over. Okay, so other opportunities for waste diversion. Looking at increasing waste diversion through what we call EPR or extended producer responsibility. This is using things like the used oil programs, tire programs, things like that. So are there more opportunities for programs like that? The municipality could promote those programs more, or look at options for perhaps having local processing facilities within the township itself. Hold more special waste collection events. So those events that take place on a Saturday, where you can come bring all your stuff down. So you're having more of those. And also exploring more multi-municipal partnerships for waste management services. And really this is looking more towards efficiencies. So sometimes when municipalities are able to partner together, they can work together to deliver a program. Perhaps that would be less expensive as a group than if they each do it on their own. So we always want to consider disposal options when we're looking at a solid waste management plan, because part of it is just making sure that the municipality has the disposal options looking into the future. So one of the options for Camper Island, the waste disposal site, would be to have what we call vertical expansion. So right now, capacity, so there's lots of capacity there for now, And if the landfill was expanded vertically, which is basically just going higher, you could add on roughly another 44 years. So there's ample capacity there for now. And this is something that really would be considered perhaps maybe 10 to 15 years before the landfill reaches its capacity. Because you want to have that time to go through your approvals and do your design and things like that. Another option that we're looking at would be to transport the garbage from Amherst Island instead of disposing it at the Amherst Island waste disposal site, would be to transfer it to the Violet waste disposal site. And then the last disposal option here would be for future expansion at Violet. But again, Violet certainly has good capacity right now for 25 to 30 years. And if you introduce an organics program, that would extend it even more. And a potential vertical expansion at another 47 years. So there's potentially lots of life at this landfill. And again, this would be something that would be considered maybe 10 to 15 years before the landfill reaches capacity. So something to keep considering each time you look at your waste management plan, but right for now, there's ample capacity. So our next steps for this project will be to consider the feedback that we'll get from the public and other stakeholders on these options that are being reviewed. So as I mentioned, it's a short list of options, and we're going to take the feedback and we'll evaluate those further, and then develop a preferred waste management plan for that. Some of the options may not come in, some of them may be put in the back burner, and then we'll develop a plan. We'll have an implementation strategy, which will outline how the options that are identified as being preferred, how they would be implemented over time, and the costing for that would be as well. So we really want to know what you're thinking, what your thoughts are. Your thoughts on the options that we have presented here. Are there things that we missed? Are there other things that you'd like us to consider? So we want you to share your thoughts with us. So here's how you can do it for those of you that are here in the audience. You can pick up a feedback form and fill it out and read it with us or send it on to the township office. One easy way would be to visit the engageloyalist.ca webpage, and you can click on provide feedback on the options, and go through the options and provide your feedback on those. You can also send your comments and any questions you have to Christina. She's the project coordinator for this at the township. Her email is here, and it's also on the Engaged Loyalist page as well. So those are ways you can get feedback into us. We're asking that the feedback is brought into to us by March 17th, and that'll give us time to go through and process everything and finish with our evaluation. So I guess with that, we'll open up to questions from our audience and and online. Do we have any questions?
So happy to take questions in the room to start with, and then we can go to the online audience. And for those who are joining us virtually, if you have questions, please feel free to use the raise hand feature, or you can also type your questions into the chat. We'll read them out loud here in the room, and we can answer them for you. So first.
Any questions?
Okay. Anyone in the virtual audience who would like to ask any questions? We'll just give a moment or two for them to appear in the chat.
So maybe I'll just go back and while we're waiting for people to fill in their questions there. So one of the questions we had from the earlier session was about some of the costing and the discussion we had about some of the costing of some of the options. For example, like for the zero waste fleet, the zero emissions fleet, and some of the options like every other new collection in terms of the costing. One of the ways that the municipality can help to sort of quantify that costing would be to bring that in as part of the tender process. So when it gets to the contract, you can include those as options, and that would be a way of determining what the true cost would be. So that's something that can be carried forward as part of the contracting process.
So not seeing any questions in the chat. Guess we'll just encourage folks, please go to the, oh, sorry, we've got a question in the Q&A, just a sec, sorry. What have we got here? On the note of costs, why would implementing compost cost so much?
So the cost, so for the compost, so basically the cost we have there would be for, that would be the annual cost. So it would be for the collection and processing. And so typically, there's the per ton cost, and we took that per ton cost and applied that to the cost for the tonnage for compost. And so really that's not so much the implementation, but really the annual operating cost. And so one of the ways of determining what that true cost would be when it comes time for a tendering process. So to look at what the contracting costs would be. That will be something that we'll take a more detailed look at as we go through our detailed evaluation phase. We're looking at some of those costs at a more granular level.
Actually, you have a question. You know what I mean?
Please go ahead.
Amherst resident. When you get all your feedback, you get all your points, how are you going to develop and compare, say, drivers like cost, which will admit will be extremely important, versus efficacy, efficiency of the whatever it may be, versus the output in terms of driving down how much garbage or recyclables, how are you going to manage that?
Well, there's different ways of looking at that. Like you could either weight have a weighting system for that. But essentially, what we'll do is we'll look at we'll have a set of criteria. We'll work that out with the city staff, and with that, just basically through discussion to look at how that will what it would achieve. And so when we do that evaluation, it's not going to be comparing with this rates this much and this rates this high, but it's really looking at how we fit in with the overall system, and that'll be factored in as part of the implementation as well.
Okay, not seeing any other questions from the online audience. So thanks to those who are watching us live. Thank you to those who are watching us at a later date. Please do visit the website and click on the provide feedback on the options. It gives you an opportunity to express your level of support for each of those options through a strongly support, somewhat support, or do not support for each of them. And then there's a space at the bottom for you to just provide any additional comments. And please, again, do have that into us if you can by March 17th, so that those comments can be considered in the final steps of developing the plan. So thank you, everybody, and have a good evening.